similarity between the Nintendo 64 and the Atari Jaguar? Well, if you guessed right, you'll probably notice that they're both 64-bit systems. One of them, the much maligned Atari Jaguar, hasn't really been given much of the limelight. It's a decent enough console, fun to play sometimes, it's got some good titles. The Nintendo 64 is lauded for some of the best games, being like Mario Kart 64, Mario 64, Zelda. It was a revolutionary system at the time, but so was the Atari Jaguar, in varying different ways. Now, I'm not going to profess to know everything about the two consoles, and I don't have a huge library of games. I've got, a couple of games on each. But it's going to be good to just have a look at the two. It's going to be an interesting comparison of the two only 64-bit game systems in the world that have been released, not counting the M2, the follow-up to the 3DO, which was planned for 1996. So we're just going to look at the games, we're going to look at the controllers, just a few different things, interesting and possibly key points. First up, the console's design itself. Now, the Nintendo 64 is okay looking. The annoying thing for me is that the dust flaps don't match up with the colour of the rest of the console, and neither do the controller ports. There are 4 controller ports, which is, nice and handy. Just on and off switch. Reset button there, and the port for expansions for a RAM pack expansion. So it's okay, but it just doesn't look particularly nice comparative to the Atari Jaguar, which was sleek and pretty defined. It looks kind of nice with that big red blazing Jaguar over it and that nice simple button. Nothing complex, no ridiculous ports. For the Nintendo 64, the cables just look horrible when plugged into this system. Plug those both in, and it looks like a fucking stick-out box and ridiculous. Look at it, it's a fucking mess. Horrible, jutting out, sticking out parts. Comparative to the Jaguar, which has just plain ports on the back for the RF and thing. Although, admittedly, there is gaping gaps where the AV cable should be, and a Jaguar link-up cable, which also is pretty cool. I think it's called Jaguar. Like a play on words. Winner, Atari Jaguar. The second part is the controllers. We're going to compare the two standard controllers of the Jaguar and Nintendo 64. So again, we're going to look at the N64 controller first. It has, an analog stick, D-pad, 6 buttons, start button, which is a pain in my ass, 'cause I'm always hitting the fucking thing when I want to pause the game. It's gotten me killed on games like Zelda before, or falling off a cliff when I'm hitting the start button to pause it. It also has 2 triggers on the sides there, a slot for memory cards, and a Z trigger, which is meant to be because you're meant to hold the controller with, your 2 hands like that, but I can't. The Jaguar controller is a beast. It's an absolute leviathan compared to most controllers, but the Nintendo 64 controller is actually bigger. A lot of people say, the Jaguar controller, it's been voted by IGN as the worst controller of all time. But actually, I find it's kind of comfortable. You've got the nice grips, the holds. It's actually fairly comfy, and it fits in my hands kind of nicely and well. It's not too overpowering, although that, number pad can be a bit intimidating, and it's got a nice reset function straight from the controller if you hit the 2 buttons on the side there, comparative to having a reset button on the console for the Nintendo 64. Also, you don't have to worry about having a stupid memory card like you would on the Nintendo 64, because this one, I don't know if this runs for every single Jaguar game, but for every single one I have, the Jaguar has a built-in save feature from every single cartridge, so you can't really argue with that. You don't have to spend out extra money on a fucking memory card. Winner again, Atari Jaguar. As I already mentioned, I'm limited by what games I actually own on the consoles, but I like to think I've got a fair representation of some of the best and worst titles on the Jag and the Nintendo 64. For the Nintendo 64, I have Zelda, Goldeneye, and Mario Kart, some of the more famous and lauded games of the system. On the Jaguar, I have a couple of hidden greats, as well as a couple of the more celebrated games like Tempest 2000 and Alien vs Predator. On the whole, I have to say that the cartridges for the Jaguar, however, look ridiculous. They look like a fucking Japanese temple. And let's be honest, do I need a handle? Especially when it has no end labels. Although, to be fair, neither does the Nintendo 64. The Nintendo 64 also has dust covers on the console for its cartridges, but they don't seem to work. I don't know if it's just the Nintendo 64 I have, or what. But a lot of the time, I have dust problems with the Nintendo 64. But with the Jaguar, I rarely have that issue. First up, we have Goldeneye on the Nintendo 64. Graphics are decent. Polygons really show kind of well. It's a fun little game. Good little shooter. It's great, not bad graphics. A lot of pre-rendered stuff. Get nice simple gameplay, and it works well with the Nintendo 64 controller. Although the Nintendo 64 controller isn't great, so it doesn't really speak volumes. It's one of the best games on the system though, and it's one of my more played titles generally for me personally. So, a fun little game, on the whole. Essentially you're just James Bond running around shooting people. Think Doom, Quake, but with less demons and more mad Russians. Next we also have the first person shooter on the Jaguar I own, Alien vs Predator. It's a more traditional Doom style of the shooters. You have the choice of 3 characters you can either pick. The aliens, the predators, or the Marines. Now, most people prefer the Marines. I'm also part of that crowd. It's one of the first games that ever offered this. In fact, I think it innovated the feature 4 years ahead of the PC version that everyone says is probably the best for that kind of style. It's the first cartridge game I've ever come across that has a loading time. Other than that nice innovation though, it's a complete and utter pile of crap. It's a boring, bland gameplay, not fun at all. A lot of it's just wandering around getting lost.
Can be done.
The aliens just pop out of fucking nowhere and it scares the shit out of everybody that plays them. Whilst that's kind of the point, after a while it just loses the fear factor of having the aliens about and not knowing where they are. It just becomes boring. Your shotgun is shit, and the pain in the arse is you have no idea what you're meant to be doing. The screen doesn't tell you at the start.
We're recording.
Go. The aliens, you just have to go killing people. You have your claw, tail, and your mouth. You can cocoon the enemy, which is part of the sort of like an extra life. What the fuck? It's a pain in the dick. You got to go close the other fucking door. It's ridiculous. So I got to go close the other door, turn around, and then go get it. In fact, I think this just sums up this game entirely. It's incredibly pedantic and makes you play to its rules. You have no idea where the fuck you're going, and unless you do everything, pinpoint exactly how you're meant to, you're going to get lost, and you're going to get fucked up the dick. It's a shit game. That is one cool part of the Jaguar, is it's a nice badass intro. Roars into you, and I think that's kind of the theme they were going for here, some sort of badass console. Unfortunately, this game isn't particularly badass. It's Checkered Flag. It's in the style of some sort of Virtua Fighter or Virtua Racing type of polygonal style. Unfortunately, it doesn't do it particularly well. Changing camera angles involves you having to press varying numbers on the number pad, which is a pain in the dick when you're trying to steer a car that doesn't steer properly. There are varying camera angles. My favourite is the in-car one because at least then you can see fairly well. The controls are hard to tell you how bad they are, but they're horrendous. The game really needs an analog stick. Unfortunately, the Jaguar doesn't have one comparative to the Nintendo 64. So with this thing, you have to keep steering it every now and then. And the steering is made fucked up by whoever made the game as well. So it steers like arse. You'd have better fun trying to, run on ice while you're the shit's being beaten out of you by a bear. Yeah, or something like that. Something along that vein. Overall, it's I get it just for the value of having it, but don't pay more about a tenner for it. For perhaps a more straight-up comparison to Checkered Flag in terms of racing game would be Grand Prix Simulator 2 Monaco on the N64. I think it's a very fun and playable title, but then again I would because I'm an F1 buff. It's not really one of those, it's not an official game, so it's probably not really your thing unless you like F1 racing games, but I think it's really fun and you can get into the career mode because it's not piss easy either. At least it's got better steering thanks to that analog stick rather than the stupid shit you have on the Checkered Flag there. Overall, it's, you know, what, a couple of quid? You might as well. It's a fun title and it's better than some of the F1 games you get on PS1, say. And way better than Checkered Flag on the Jag. Cutting corners blatantly. This is Hover Strike on the Jaguar. I think it shows off the 3D capabilities of the system a little bit better, and it kind of looks like an improved PS1 game. It's easily something I'd find on either of those, either the PS1 or the Sega Saturn, or even the Nintendo 64. So it shows that it has the power to do all these fancy 3D things. The premise is you're sort of flying around in a cockpit here, shooting things. There's just mission objectives to do. You're a hover tank, that's why it's called Hover Strike. You get a variety of different weapons to fire and enemies to kill. It's a decent enough game. I recommend getting this one up. It's really good value for the money. It's normally less than £10 easily. I picked it up for £7 unboxed, so it's well worth adding to any Jaguar collector's library. Go for it.
We're recording already.
Of course, I've got the ubiquitous Mario Kart. You couldn't go without talking about Mario Kart, really. I mean, there's nothing to say. It's one of the greatest games ever in terms of driving. You get a few drunk people driving this, and it's just going to be a hell of a laugh. There's a good mix of pre-rendered and fully rendered 3D graphics. Of course, it's Mario Kart, so there's all the crazy items and power-ups. And come on, it's Mario Kart, so it's obviously going to be fun. Obviously worth getting on the Nintendo 64. Normally around £10 to £12 you're looking at. Not too bad. Go on Amazon, it's a little bit more expensive, but you know it's in good condition. I don't think any Zelda game, any N64 review would be complete without talking about The Legend of Zelda. Quite possibly the best games ever made on the system. Debatable choice perhaps for some, but I think these are two of the most worthwhile games you'll ever get. They're nice and common. Majora's Mask is harder to find, but still fairly common, and it's more expensive, and that's the only problem. It's about £40 on the on Amazon, and I don't know how much cheaper it is on the Xbox, on eBay. It's a fun game, of course. I mean, it's Zelda. What do you expect? It's happy little stuff, talking to some ginger douchebag. It's like, shut the fuck up now. I've equipped my sword and shield. Yeah, suck my dick, you can. Yes it is. Shut the fuck up, King. They see me rolling, they hating. He's on his own. He's an angry ginger. That guy's an angry ginger. This is Tempest 2000. I think this is the best Jaguar game I own. Mostly because the music's actually kick-ass and the gameplay is just so fun. It's really addicting. You're basically shooting things through webs, and they call them webs. You're a spaceship claw in space. It's a trippy concept, but the music is cracking. Listen. It's a really addictive and fun game anyways. It looks good as well. I think this should have been the pack-in title rather than Sidemorph. I'm disappointingly I don't have Sidemorph yet. But I'll get it and I'll probably show it in an individual Jaguar review at some stage. So the winner there was, I'd probably have to say the Nintendo 64, honestly. I think it's just the better quality of the graphics and the 64 bits, because it's one of those things, and I'll go into it more in depth when I do each system separately, but one of them is actually 64-bit, whereas the Jaguar is kind of 64-bit. It's got a mash of 64-bit, 32-bit, and heck, even a 16/32-bit processor in there. So, I mean, there's just action shots. So, to go over a quick summary of each system, we went over them both, and we've looked at some of the games, we've looked at the highlights, the good parts, and I can't get the fucking thing unplugged. There we go. Stupid power packs. So, essentially, we've got the two systems up for comparison. The Nintendo 64, I think, had the better graphics. I mean, that's fairly well done. Although better 3D quality, I thought, on the Atari Jaguar, in terms of real-time rendering off the cartridge. The only last gripe I think I really have to make a point about is the expansion pack. Now, the expansion port on the this counts as probably add-ons, so this is the add-ons discussion. We can just cut that bit, yeah, right? Yeah, cool. The Atari Jaguar has no add-ons. You don't need to, have a save memory card thing. I have one in the other controller there. Or you don't have to have silly things to buy. You have a controller, you have the console, that's it. Most of the games come with a save feature. This one you can save up to 3 different games. That one saves you high scores. It's nice, it's handy. It's not something you find often on cartridge games. Some Nintendo 64 games like Wipeout 64 don't save, but then others like Mario Kart sort of do a half save, half on the cartridge saves. And then you got obviously Ocarina of Time, which by the weight of it, you can save up to 3 games on there. It sort of swings and roundabouts. I think what you have to really consider is the technology in this is older than the technology in this. But the RAM expansion pack, and before I get too far off track, this thing handily came with my system at the time, so that's kind of cool. But the basic idea is you had what was called the jumper pack, and that essentially was your RAM. It's 4 megabytes of RAM, I believe. I know, well, fuck me, 4 meg of RAM. The point is here is that this would expand the amount of RAM by double to 8 megabytes of available RAM. Some games like Majora's Mask needs it, so that is my one real big gripe. Like, why the fuck would you put that in there rather than like have it at the start and just put the RAM expansion pack in there? Fuck knows what they were thinking at Nintendo. So that's what really pisses me off about that one. That and the fact that you have a memory card you have to buy for the stupid fucking controller. You don't have to bother with this. Jaguar wins add-ons straight away. No questions asked. So, to summarise, I think both systems have their own place in time. I mean, the Nintendo 64, for a lot of noobs, will be the system of choice as far as retro gaming has. I don't have nostalgic value for either system. I bought them both around the same sort of time. So, for me, I don't have a winner. The world wouldn't be complete without either of these two systems. So that's me, Retro Rampage, signing out. Dropping this Nintendo 64. Yeah, that's me signing out.